Hello, students, friends, faculty, staff, alumni. It's a wonderful pleasure to welcome you here to the third Rhett Talk this year of our series of Rhett Talks. We have one more next week at Warren, and I invite you to Warren in particular because I am a faculty in residence at Warren. So yay, Warren. I am Jennifer Knust and our Jenny, and I am a professor in the School of Theology where I teach ancient Christianity, and I'm also a professor in CAS where I teach religion and in core, so I know the person I'm about to introduce quite well. So let's see if I'm remembering everything I'm supposed to say. Yes, this is the fourth year. So the Rhett Talks, if you haven't been, you're in for a real treat. They're inspired a little bit by the TED Talks, although they have their own very special BU spin. I think you will see that we have a wonderful, distinguished, and interesting and exciting lineup for this evening, as every single Rhett Talk has been that I've been to. And I also know from having done one that they're quite strict. So, stick to your time, everyone, or you're in trouble. So it is also my pleasure to introduce a colleague and I hope friend and someone I admire very much, Professor Loren J. Samons. Professor Samons was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and studied classics and history at Baylor University before earning his PhD in ancient history at Brown University. Professor Samons, whom his friends call Jay, has published widely on Greek politics and history and on the relationships between ancient and modern democracy and between democracy and imperialism. His books include What's Wrong with Democracy? From Athenian Practice to American Worship, The Cambridge Companion to the Age of Pericles, and most recently, Pericles and the Conquest of History, published this year by Cambridge University Press. Jay Samons has been teaching in the Department of Classical Studies at Boston University since 1993. Apart from writing about Greek history, he spends his summers either helping lead the BU summer study in Athens or harassing the trout population of North America. This evening, he will be presenting a Rhett Talk entitled The Problem with Democracy. Professor Samons.
Thank you very much, Professor Knust. The trout of this summer were sadly less harassed than they should have been. The problem with democracy. Is there a problem? Some of you must be thinking that. Is there a problem with democracy? Or maybe a few of you are thinking he should have entitled this The Problems with Democracy. I hope you've all eaten tonight because my goal is to upset your stomach. I want to disturb you and make you uncomfortable, and I want to make you question everything you believe or think you believe about government and about democracy. I wrote a book a few years ago, called What's Wrong with Democracy? And whenever I went to give talks, somehow I had to explain myself. I mean, what kind of American goes around writing books called What's Wrong with Democracy? This seems completely wrong. But somehow in the fall of 2016, as we press on towards November, I find I don't need to defend myself quite so much. Everyone seems... And yet, I know we all have an inherent bias in favor of democracy. I noticed this for the first time in about 1993. 1993 happened to be the 2,500-year anniversary of the founding of Demokratia, democracy, in Athens. And Greek historians all over the world celebrated with wild parties. And if you know what Greek historians are like, you can imagine just how crazy these parties really were. 2,500 years of democracy. It's time to have a party. Let's get together a volume here and publish our essays. That's what Greek historians do. The funny thing to me was I couldn't remember any parties like that in 1991, which was the 2,500-year anniversary of the founding of the Roman Republic. I mean, is it just that Roman historians don't like to party? What's going on here? Historians all over especially in the United States, celebrated the founding of democracy in a way they never celebrated the founding of republicanism. And indeed, we've come to think of democracy just as a word that means things we like. We name governments we like democratic and governments we don't like undemocratic. Things that the government does that we like, we call democratic. Things that we don't like, we call undemocratic. You won't find a political science department in the United States that is dedicated to finding the next best best form of government. They've all decided we're in it. All right? The only thing we do now is try to find a way to make our democracy more democratic, which is sort of like trying to find a way to make water more wet. Don't we have some standard against which we can judge democracy? Is it only democracy itself? So these books came out in 1993, 94, 95, celebrating the history of celebrating Athenian democracy, and even suggesting that we could find ways to improve our government today by using Athens as a model. Athens could serve as a model for modern democracy. Now, this was an astounding proposition because in these books, the learned men who wrote them never talked about the history of Athens. They never actually talked about what happened in those less than 200 years when the Athenians had a democratic form of government. And I put it to you, the reason they didn't talk about it was because it's a very sobering tale. It's not a tale of grandeur. It's a tale of sadness. It's true that soon after they founded democracy, the Athenians put together a league of Greek states that defended Greece from the massive Persian Empire. Absolutely, along with other Greek states, they did that. But the Athenians then quickly turned that league defending Greece into an empire over which they ruled quite ruthlessly, where they exploited other Greek states by forcing them to pay up. That was one of the least invasive things that happened. Pay up, or else. And the or else consisted of large fleets of Athenian ships that roved around the Aegean Sea, taking money and dealing out death and slavery. That was the history of Athenian government in the middle of the 5th century. People who knew Athens knew them as rulers. They didn't know about Sophocles or Pericles or care that the Parthenon was being built on Athens. They cared that around the next island was probably a fleet of Athenian warships liable to take their stuff. So Athenian democracy was quite aggressive. And that money that the Athenians collected, it's true they stacked it on an island for a decade or two and said, oh, we're saving this money in case the Persians ever come back and we need more ships. But soon that became very inconvenient. And they brought that money to Athens itself around the year 454 BC, and then they began, shocked, to spend like drunken sailors. And the reason the Athenians built the most fantastic buildings in Greece up to that time, like the Parthenon on the Acropolis, was because they had the wealth of other Greeks at their disposal. And they had voted to do all these things. The Athenians voted to build this fleet, to use this fleet for these purposes, to take money from other Greeks, and then to use it on themselves. And it wasn't just enough to build buildings. They decided, why don't we pay ourselves? For example, we're not getting paid to serve on juries right now, and we have very large juries in Athens, hundreds of citizens at a time. Wouldn't it be nice if we paid ourselves to sit on those juries? Well, the Athenian voter raised his hand quite quickly. Yes, it would be wonderful if we paid ourselves to serve on those juries. This goes on with until in the 430s, the Athenians vote to go to war with Sparta, or rather vote not to avoid a war with Sparta, and the Spartans were begging to get out of this war. But the Athenians go into this war, which ends up lasting for 27 years, refusing offers of peace that are offered by the Spartans over and over again, voting not to take those offers, incur a massive amount of debt, a debt the likes of which no Greek state had ever seen before. The Athenians voted to incur that debt. When the war was over, they lost. That's another problem with these books celebrating Athens as a model, is that Athens lost virtually every war it fought against other Greek powers. They lost that war, and the Spartans determined not to inflict on Athens the punishment that Athens had inflicted on many other Greek states, namely, kill all the men and enslave the women and children. The Spartans, although they were encouraged by their allies to do exactly this, kill all the men and enslave the women and children, the Spartans said, no, we're not going to do that. So when Athens is defended, as it is sometimes by historians who say the Athenians suffered no fatal mistakes, my response to that is wrong. The only reason the Peloponnesian War, the war with Sparta, was not fatal is because the victors decided not to destroy Athens, as they might very well have done. I mean, I could go on and on with this list of problems in Athenian government. In the 4th century after the Peloponnesian War, the Athenians vote, well, they're already paying themselves for things like juries. Now they pay themselves to serve in other offices. Eventually, they paid themselves to vote. They voted to pay themselves to vote. What a fantastic idea. They topped that off with paying themselves to go to the theater. I mean, really, to pay that little theater ticket, let's get some subsidies in here. Now, meanwhile, Macedon is building an army in the north of Greece. Macedon is like being afraid of Saskatchewan, the ancient Greeks thought. They're just hillbillies up there. We really don't need to worry about them. No need to transfer money into our military treasuries out of the treasuries that pay for the theater tickets and the other things we're using. No, don't worry about Philip of Macedon. Well, Philip of Macedon had other ideas. Eventually, he brought his hillbilly army into southern Greece and conquered the southern Greeks. And Athens lost her independence and lost her democratic government in less than 200 years. So there's a good reason that the founders of America had questions about democracy. And they didn't look at Athens as a model for America to be founded on. They were quite dubious about the Athenian model and what Athenians had voted to do. They were much more likely to approve of the Roman Republic than they were of Athens, and more likely to approve of Sparta than they were of Athens, of all things. But we somehow have imbibed this democratic ideology now. A democracy is one of the things you can't question in polite company. You can say all kinds of things that you've got citizen armies, marriage, monogamy, whatever. You can question any of those things, but just talk about the vote. Question the vote. No, I don't think voting is good. I don't plan to vote. See how the conversation goes if you do that. If you light up a cigarette, you'll probably get slapped. All right? Somehow we've accepted the ideology of democracy, which is that majorities make good decisions. Now, of course, most of the Greeks who wrote about this subject didn't feel that way. Plato certainly didn't. He has Socrates mock this idea in his own trial. Socrates tells the Athenian jurors who are hearing his case, you're not going to make the right decision. Groups never make the right decision. And I put it to you right now, if you have a problem with your car, you don't go into Warren Towers or the Student Village and get as many people as you possibly can and bring them down to listen to your car and then take a vote on what's wrong. Could be the CV joint, might be the fuel injectors. No, you go to people who know about cars. So the Greeks found it, some Greeks noticed that it was odd that we put our faith in the majority for decisions about government, but not about anything else. Why don't we embrace the idea of, say, restricting the vote to people who have done something to earn it? That was the Greek idea, not a democratic idea. All Greeks felt this way. Spartans, Thebans, Corinthians, Athenians. It wasn't a democratic idea, it was a Greek idea, and the idea is citizenship. Is that you have to earn the privilege of governing and serving in office. But somehow we feel bad about asking people to do something to earn their citizenship. And we pay so little for citizenship that I put it to you, we value it very lightly, just as we usually do with things that we don't pay for. Now, when you have a concept of citizenship or the vote that's been hollowed out of any responsibilities, of any duties you actually have to perform, the only real duty we have to perform now is that we have to vote, and 50% of us go out and do it every 4 years in national elections. Aren't we responsible? When you have a hollowed out idea of citizenship like this, it gives ample opportunity for demagogues. Because demagogues, I put it to you, my definition of a demagogue is someone who tells you he will give you what you want without you having to do anything. You don't have to do anything at all. You just have to vote for me. If you vote for me, you'll get the things you want. I wrote a piece for a weblog a month or two ago they asked me to write it about democracy and demagogues. And the thesis was basically, if you have democracy, you're going to have demagogues. It's very simple. Well, Time online picked this piece up and ran it under a headline that said something like, what history tells us about demagogues like Trump. Well, I didn't write that about Trump. I wrote it about all demagogues, scholars, friends. We don't have one demagogue facing a non-demagogue. We have two demagogues in this election. We have an anti-establishment demagogue who says the establishment is rigged. It has to be thrown out. Vote for me and I'll give you what you want. And we have an establishment demagogue who says the system is good. It just needs to be tweaked and expanded. Vote for me and I'll give you what you want. But you don't need to do anything except cast your vote. Demagogues love to divide and conquer, scholars, just like the Romans. So one of the things they do is they find little pockets of voters. One pocket they promise to lower their taxes, and another pocket they promise to create a special program just for that person, or expand the program that you care about, and you'll get your vote that way. And I put it to you that you students have been turned cynically into a voting constituency. And it's been done through high tuition rates combined with loans. Now, 20 years ago, the last 20 years, the consumer price index has gone up 55%. Right? The basket of goods by which we measure inflation has gone up 55%. You want to guess how much national private university tuition has gone up in that time? 179% over the same period. Public school, public university tuition, worse, 290%. At the same time, the federal government has created a massive loan program and expanded it so that the money is out there to get. You can get loans. Come and get them. Don't worry about the price of the university because we'll give you a loan that'll let you pay for it. Well, yeah, at the end of of your 4 years, you're going to have a massive loan to pay off. And maybe there's going to be some politicians out there that are going to promise to reduce the amount you have to pay, lengthen the time you have to pay it, bring down the percentage of your income that you have to pay. Now it's down to 10%. Somebody's going to come along and say, why are we asking for 10%? That sounds like a tithe. That's completely unfair. Let's lower it to 9% or 8%. Yeah? So you've become a wonderful tool for future demagogues who can appeal to you on this basis. The total student debt in the United States right now is $1.44 trillion. The national debt is less than $20 trillion. Total credit card debt in America is $882 million. Student debt is almost twice as much as credit card debt. That is astounding. The average student who owes debt owes $35,000. In the time it takes me to give this talk, national debt will have gone up, student debt will have gone up $2.5 million. It's going up $10 million an hour as we sit here. Yes? So yeah, somebody's going to come along and ask for your vote on this basis. What can you do for me? Or what I can do for you? Big education, scholars, but you never hear anybody talk about it. I hear big oil talked about and big pharmaceuticals, but where is big education? Well, this is a nonprofit institution. Well, somebody's profiting from these institutions, aren't they? The people who built this building profited, I suggest to you. All kinds of administrators that are making $400, $500, $600, $700, $800,000 salaries are profiting, but it's a nonprofit institution, scholars. It's a nonprofit institution. Now, I'll end with this. One of our Greek friends, Aristotle, suggested that when you have voting and you have elections, you don't end up with the rule of the middle class or the rule of the poor. You end up with the rule of the rich. If you have voting, you will end up with the rule of the rich. Boy, he would have loved 2016, wouldn't he? Where we have the choice between a filthy rich candidate and a disgustingly rich candidate. Yeah? You choose which one you want. But the Senate, Professor Samons, must be full of middle-class Americans. Really? And the House of Representatives, you think so? Somehow we end up with rule of the rich and we're doing the voting. The problem with democracy is not so much the system of government as it is the people who are casting the votes. People who tell you you can get what you want without having to do anything are liars. There is no goal in your life you're ever going to achieve and no goal we're going to achieve collectively by doing nothing. By simply walking into a booth and pulling a lever or filling in a line. That is not sufficient for citizenship. It doesn't make you a good citizen. When you get that sticker after you go vote that says, I voted, and everybody walks around so proud of themselves, yeah? It's because there's nothing else we can do at this point, we think, to make ourselves distinguished as citizens. We have to get the sticker. And once we get the sticker, we're good. That's not enough. Serious goals require serious work. You should evaluate candidates based on their willingness to tell you, I can't solve your problems. The government cannot solve all your problems. You have to do some things yourself, and the first thing you're going to have to do is take responsibility for yourself. You're going to have to live up to the ideal of citizenship rather than just the ideal of democracy. As long as we believe that we fulfilled our duties as citizens simply by voting, as long as we cast our ballots based on what can this person do for me, then we're going to get precisely the quality of government we deserve. Thank you.
Hi, Professor. How many questions can I ask at one time?
How many?
I got 3. Okay, I'm just going to ask all 3, and you can answer wherever you want. It's okay. First one, about let's talk back to the Athens. So although we say the democracy, like the Athens voted, and it's pretty bad for the other country, right? But it's pretty good for their country because they are voting for bad thing but gaining their own profit. So what if we spread the democracy to the world? And the world is like one single country, so we are benefiting ourselves.
Let me answer that one first. Yeah, spreading democracy is what America has been trying to do. We obviously think it's the best form of government because we go around the world giving it to other countries. Yeah, and they take it whether they like it or not. But my answer to you would be the problem, that doesn't address the problem. It's the character of the citizenry in any state that's the first issue. And you can give them ever so nice a form of government that makes everyone feel good. But the citizens themselves have to express ideals of what it means to be good, to be a good citizen. So no, I don't think spreading democracy all over the world is going to do anything but spread these problems.
Okay, and second question. There are a lot of flaws about the democracy, but there are also a lot of flaws in communism and other forms of government. So can we say it's not just the flaw of democracy, but it's the flaw of human nature?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. It's true that the greatest argument against a critic of democracy is to say, well, what's the form of government you propose? And my response to that is, I don't propose a form of government. I propose qualities of citizenship, that a state needs to decide, whatever size that state is, what do we rate as good? What makes you a good citizen? What do you have to do? We can come up with a menu of things. It doesn't have to be one thing. It doesn't have to be owned property, which is what people thought in this 18th century. And I don't think any of us would agree with that now. But we could come up with a list of 20 or 30 things, couldn't we? Even a very low bar, maybe, and say, you don't cross the street without checking both ways before you go across. There ought to be something you have to do to earn your citizenship. So once you have that ideal of citizenship, then you can do all kinds of different things with government. You can have a Republican form of government. You can have a more direct form of democracy. But the problem with democracy is that it's going to encourage these ideas that voting makes you good. Yeah?
That answers my third question. Thank you.
2 and 1, all right.
Thank you, Professor. Hello? Thank you, Professor. It was a really good talk. It's kind of a roller coaster. I have a question. So you said at the very end that you can have these rules of citizenship, but isn't that exactly kind of what we have, where our rule of citizenship is following the law and the voting privilege can be taken away or given? For example, I think felons cannot vote.
Yeah,
so
that's
couldn't
true.
they eventually vote to who has citizenship and who does not have citizenship?
Yes, it's true. We have a way of losing the citizenship, but that law is under attack. There are politicians out there right now who want to allow felons to vote and say this is unfair, that to let people who've paid their debt to society. Now, there's a certain logic to that, isn't it? If you've really paid your debt to society, then why shouldn't you be allowed to vote? So we still have this way of losing your citizenship, but we don't have any standards for gaining it. That's the real issue for me. There need to be some standards for gaining your citizenship. Things that you can perform to gain the privilege of casting your vote and serving in office.
Hi, Professor. Thank you for speaking. I really enjoyed everything you were saying. It was great stuff.
Thank you.
If we were able to establish a system in which each citizen is individually checked for their citizenship, they uphold these standards that you were talking about before. How do we hold people accountable without making them angry? If that makes sense.
I love this question. How do we hold them accountable without making them angry? You're not going to. They're going to be people who are going to be upset because they don't rate citizenship. Absolutely. Whatever the standard is we choose, and whether it's, running a successful business, taking care of your children. There could be all kinds of standards. They don't have to have anything to do with money. Just identify some social goods and say, if you can show one of these social goods. So it's more of a positive thing than finding reasons to take it away, right? We find positive reasons to say, yeah, you're a citizen. Good to see you out here voting today. I know you've done something to earn that citizenship. But we are not going to be able to not make people angry. We're making people angry now. Look at what's going on in the country. Is everyone happy with this system? Is everyone just so excited that we've got the system we have? And, well, whatever you can say about it, we're certainly not going to get upset. Yeah, it's a happy system. It just doesn't go my way sometimes. Yeah? No, that's not the way it is now. So, but I would never set up a standard of don't make anyone angry.
So if there's no, initially or clearly preferable form of government that is not democracy, is there any society in history that got citizenship right, at least?
Yeah, well, I think that I'm not talking about the Athenians now. I think that the ancient Greeks did an amazingly good job at this. It's not an Athenian thing, it's a Greek thing. I want to make that clear. And so did the Roman Republic. And that's why the Roman Republic was attractive to the founders and why Sparta was too. The Greek ideal of citizenship wasn't unattractive, and it was for good reason. Now, the bar they set was really, really high. And one of the things you were going to have to do was to be willing to go out and fight. You were going to have to be willing to serve in the military. And I'm not suggesting I'm not suggesting any one standard. I think one standard would be a mistake. Yeah, I think there should be many standards. But let me just end with this, y'all. I am not saying if we change our government, we will make things better. We won't. This talk is not about changing government. It's not about changing laws. It's not about changing a constitution. It's about changing yourself. It's about us looking inside ourselves and saying, what will make us better? What will make us better citizens, better students, better husbands, better fathers, better daughters, better wives, better everything? That's what it's about. Okay? Thank y'all.